Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because this one's a doozy. So I've covered Kickstarter disasters in the past, but even among them, this feels like it's in a league of its own. So let's talk about DreamWorld, which is an indie MMO, which is an ambitious endeavor, and this is the Kickstarter campaign in question. It raised $64,000 from 663 backers. The goal was $10,000. Now, immediately, the red flag here is you're asking $10,000 to create an MMO. It takes way more money for you to create a solid MMO, and even $64,000 is not enough. But this is what they raised, and they did advertise that, we do have other investors, which I'll get to in a bit. But let's check out the trailer of DreamWorld here in the Kickstarter campaign. You kind of get a feeling for the kind of game this was meant to be and just how rough it looked from the outset. So let's check this out. So you can see there are like Minecraft-y elements. The whole idea is, you can build anywhere in this MMO world. And the character models are kind of all over the place. A lot of this stuff looks like stock assets. But a lot of people looked at the idea of this, and I'll present what the idea of this MMO is in a bit. Again, this MMO promises the moon. Trying to achieve what even AAA MMOs can't achieve. But I think you get the gist of it. This is kind of what it looks like. It's a very strange looking game. With very inconsistent... Oh, and that performance... Alright, so that was like a minute long, and this is one of the leads in question who's kind of been facing scandal because of this whole situation. So, what does DreamWorld promise? First and foremost on this list is the infinite open world MMO, whatever that means. And then right here it says one single world, millions of players. What they're promoting here isn't that this game over a number of servers and whatnot can house millions of players. It's saying that in one instance of a world, it can house millions of players. I mean, that would be quite the feat. Not even AAA developers have been able to accomplish something like this. Now, it is acknowledged here that we know MMOs cannot be built with just $10,000. We have secured the majority of our funding from some of the best investors in Silicon Valley. Now, as far as its main investor goes, there's a scandal surrounding that, which I'll get to in a bit. But scrolling down, you'll find some gifts and some more features that are being promised. You can permanently impact everything you see by building on this open world, infinite MMO. Cut or plant every tree, mine every mountain, turn every resource into your creation. Meet, fight, quest, and build with millions. And then there's some Pokemon elements to it. Find, tame, hatch, and raise your own loving companions. This MMO just seems like it's trying to cram everything. There's no cohesive theme. It's just every feature from every game in one. And they take it even further, scrolling down here. The long-term vision for this game is literally every genre, every style, every game type there has ever been and will be, all in one world. There's a complete lack of vision here. You cannot make a game by just saying, it's gonna be a bit of everything. You have to focus on something. What kind of genre is it? Who specifically is it going to appeal to? By striving to be everything, you're being more of a jack of all trades and a master of none, though even saying jack of all trades feels like way too much of a compliment, given the nature and state of this game. Now, beyond how questionable it is that they're asking for $10,000 for this really ambitious MMO, conceptually probably the most ambitious out there, and aside from even $64,000 not being enough to fund this game, there's also the question of the developers, their lack of experience, and the number of developers working on this game. So when the Kickstarter was announced, here's what they said on that front. 2 full-time devs, 1 part-time dev, 8 months of development. This MMO that's aiming to be a little bit of everything, that's intending to house 1 million players in one instance world. And here's one more crazy promise: the ability to import 3D models from anywhere online and use them in-game, which I don't know how you're supposed to make that work in a massively multiplayer online title. But that was the promise, and 663 people were compelled enough to invest quite a bit of money. So where does the scandal kick in? Well, as you may very well imagine, this game has not been able to fulfill many of its promises, if any of them. And all of this was highlighted in this PC Gamer article published a couple days ago, whose headline reads, "This MMO that promised an infinite open world has become a giant fiasco." If you just want this story in text form, this PC Gamer article does a great job of summarizing everything. But I'd like to go ahead and go through pieces of this article and share my reactions and commentary to all of this. So again, there is the promise of hosting millions of players in a single immersive world, and the creators of DreamWorld are Garrison Bellick and Zachary Kaplan, who, not only are they just 2 developers trying to create basically the most ambitious MMO ever made, but they've never made a commercial game. Now, Kaplan advertised that he has 9 years of game development experience, but that experience comes from Flash games, some work in Unity, and documentation relating to DreamWorld. That's like saying I'm a professional photographer. I've been doing photography for 9 years. I've been every once in a while taking selfies with my phone. Just that kind of presentation. When you say I have 9 years of game development experience, people expect something more kind of professional than Flash games and some work in Unity. Without specificity, you know, this carries very little weight. Beyond that, Kaplan is said to be an entrepreneur and self-described marketer whose startup experience seems to consist of a wearable Bluetooth speaker called Core Aegis. Marketer, I think, is the big one here. The Kickstarter campaign certainly markets many miraculous promises, but obviously it's one thing to market a game, it's another to actually make it and bring it to life. Now, scrolling down here, there's some information on the investor. It's backed by the world's best-known startup accelerator, Y Combinator. Y Combinator has a rigorous vetting process topped off by an exclusive demo day with selected investors. You might have heard of its alumni, Twitch, Dropbox, Coinbase, Airbnb, tech titans valued at billions of dollars. There are a handful of smaller companies making games with YC backing. So the question then becomes, how did Y Combinator, who goes through a rigorous vetting process before investing in a project, get roped into a project like DreamWorld, which, you know, doesn't take much to see that it is very likely far too ambitious for its own good? That will be answered later in the article. I'll get to that in a bit. But aside from PC Gamer's compilation, a lot of these accusations are coming from content creators and streamers. So Kira TV and Josh Strife Hayes are among those who have been outspoken about the scammy nature of this project. And the main accusation is that DreamWorld is a scam, an impossible project helmed by 2 people who have no idea what they're doing. Testimonials include this quote from Kira, who said, "A fucking Frankenstein of cut and paste code from other people's work." Upton said in his video, 90% of the assets that I've found that they've used, which have just been ones I've listed, have been free in the last 8 months. This is very much just an asset flip of a game. An asset flip MMO. And as if all that wasn't enough, critics within the community have pointed out that none of the assets appear to be appropriately credited. And especially as far as the code of this game goes, it's pretty much all without any original coding. It's all just asset packs that, again, they don't even credit. Another scammy element to all this is that there is still no word on release date, and with this Kickstarter, there's no obligation for them to have a release date because the Kickstarter only mentions access to the alpha. Pre-alpha would only be available to people who invited 2 friends to pledge, not unlike a multi-level marketing scheme. So strictly speaking, they have no obligation to actually ship a finished game to any of these backers. The only obligation this Kickstarter has is to deliver basically an early access unfinished game. Then there's mention of how there's an absence of technical information about how the developers can make a million-person MMO in a single, persistent, infinite world. I'll emphasize again, not even AAA developers have been able to accomplish this. How is it expected that two developers who basically have no experience in game development will be able to achieve this technical marvel? Here's a testimonial from MMO streamer Joff Strive Hayes. The problem that the DreamWorld developers bumped into was they completely underestimated how dedicated the MMORPG fanbase is to research. MMORPG players will data mine on day 0 of a patch. The MMO community, they're very ardent about ensuring that MMOs have a level of integrity and calling that stuff out. And so when the project went awry, when people actually started to check out the MMO and the kind of project this was, much of its scam elements began to really come to light. Something else that's shady is that the developers of this game had reached out to content creators to essentially give positive coverage for payment. MMO Byte streamer Styx claimed that an unnamed developer reached out about giving positive coverage of their Kickstarter game. In return, he said he was offered 20% of all their earnings. Styx made the offer public, and the developers tried to walk everything back. So Styx had enough integrity to call this shit out, ousting the developers for engaging in an incredibly shady practice, trying to buy out a content creator for promotion, and you can imagine the kind of backlash that generated. Now, here's where Y Combinator comes in. Here's where that becomes controversial. The most serious accusation is that DreamWorld only got its Y Combinator backing through nepotism. So there was no actual vetting process, it was just a favor. Bellic has a friend in the accelerator who helped greenlight DreamWorld without the appropriate due diligence. Here's a specific quote from Upton. DreamWorld wasn't vetted. They apparently had nothing to show on demo day, and they were still allowed through. So shady development practices, shady overselling with Kickstarter, shady marketing practices by trying to buy out positive coverage, nepotism as far as investment goes with no proper vetting. Yeah. This stuff keeps piling on. And then we have shady dealings as far as community treatment goes. DreamWorld team implemented a verification system using the alt-identifier bot to keep out banned users. And we're talking about a situation where any semblance of criticism would immediately get a user banned, even if they expressed a bit of concern they'd get banned. I watched mildly critical comments disappear, and the only adult mod quit. Now, you may be asking, what do you mean only adult mod? Well, as we'll see later in the article, these guys hired kids to be moderators. Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. The mood in the Discord oscillates between cult-like enthusiasm, intermittent skepticism, and half-hearted jokes about not being able to voice real concerns without getting banned. I am reminded of Star Citizen reading this paragraph. When given feedback or when asked questions, the developers hardly respond. They don't really keep up with the community all that much. Now, the whole hiring kids thing. Mods were mostly children. A rumor so crazy that initially people covering this game just brushed it off. No way. It's gotta be just rumors. No way that's real. But they came to me after this rumor was spreading around and they were like, no, we're 14 and 16. And one of the ways that they found these kids is by poaching them from Fortnite and Minecraft. DreamWorld team had DM bombed players in Fortnite and Minecraft, and for much of that hiring spree, what they promoted was, hey, we'll get you Amazon gift cards and Uber Eats to the moderators as some form of non-payment, because they obviously can't pay them. But some of these kids were offered as much as full-time jobs. The developers reportedly offered to fly 2 kids to Redwood City for internships. Jack, a 14-year-old mod who has since left the community, was allegedly promised a full-time job. Keep in mind that while the legal age of employment is 14 years old, that is the minimum, when you're younger than 16 years old, you cannot be offered a full-time job. You can only work so many hours. You can only be offered lighter work that will not affect your, safety and health and education. And so promising a 14-year-old a full-time job, not strictly illegal from what I understand, and putting legalities aside, poaching kids like this just feels incredibly creepy and shady. And beyond that, you're not presenting yourself as a professional game developer when you're hiring kids, and the kids won't even treat it properly. A former mod had this to say: "I've been a part of Discord since 2015, and I've never seen game developers hide from the community and ban people from the shadows, then let a 14 and 16-year-old kid take the blame for it. That's pathetic." Now, eventually, some content creators did gain access to the alpha of the game, among them being Skiatzos, a DreamWorld backer and YouTuber, who had some experiences to share, among them being that the only discernible difference between the pre-alpha and alpha, as Skiatzos observed in a live stream, is that the developers have added grass to the game. So from pre-alpha to alpha, you want to make some leaps in progress. Grass was basically the only difference that was seen. At a certain point, the map just ends. You can fall off the edge. So there are no walls to confine the world within certain boundaries. There's copyrighted music in the game, and when Upton reached out to the music publisher about this, it was verified that they did not, in fact, license the music to this game, so they're using copyrighted music in an illicit way. The main city mostly consists of buildings that have no colliders, so you can just walk through walls, and it's this empty space with basically ghost buildings. Other players appear as nameless orbs with the default Unreal Mannequin texture. There's no way to tell who it is or how they're armed if you fight them in the PvP arena. So aside from this game being an asset flip, there's also just across the board very little effort put in, just anything, really. Oh, but it gets worse. The lapse in security in this game, especially being an MMO, is just baffling. Upton live-streamed the alpha and discovered that it was possible to hack the game, speed up the server's day and night cycle, and give himself unlimited resources by sending packets to the server because nothing was being authenticated or validated. You can literally tell the server you've done whatever you want. It is so easy to hack this game that it doesn't take much for you to basically become a god in this world. Upton added a new weather system, spawned thousands of clouds, and crashed the game by basically turning on developer mode because of how easy it is to hack this MMO. The damage you could do with this to somebody else's computer is bad. Keep in mind, this is an MMO environment. Your actions do affect other players, and if you can hack the game and load in assets to a degree that isn't tenable for certain people's hardware, then yeah, that's a bad situation. But beyond that, we have security issues. DreamWorld servers isn't making any checks at all, which allowed him to trick the server on livestream. There's the potential to have code run remotely on other users' machines through this. So this isn't just a shitty, overambitious game made by two developers who have no idea what they're doing. It is a genuine security risk for anyone who engages with this. The story gets crazier as one of the two key developers, Kaplan, his ex-fiancée at one point had to speak out because the guy was spouting bullshit and using their relationship as a means to market this game. It is mentioned by PC Gamer how Kaplan presented a sad origin story for the game, and among the inspirations was, "My fiancé left me soon after," and, struggle with unemployment and all of these things inspired him to make this game, is kind of how he presented himself, this sob story that has no truth to it, at least as far as the fiance part of it goes. Apparently, the idea of this game came out of the sadness of losing all of that and everything falling apart. No, he was literally already multiple months into developing DreamWorld before I broke up with him. The fact that he's using our breakup to leverage his Kickstarter video in this way, it just feels like straight up emotional marketing. Oh no, it's also manipulation, alright. That's what marketing is at the end of the day, emotional manipulation. It seldom tends to be about trying to present an accurate version of the product. It's about presenting the flashiest version of the product to sell something that people will hope lives up enough to the marketing. It's not the honest story, timeline, or motive. So this guy really comes off as a compulsive grifter, liar, scammer, manipulator, And this is further highlighted by this bit. When Kaplan proposed to his ex-fiancée at a red carpet event, he gave her an enormous diamond ring that turned out to be fake. And when he got called out on it, he proceeded to lie about the ring's authenticity for 10 months. Who freaking does that? In the same way you cannot build marriages on a lie, you cannot build a thriving community, and you certainly cannot build a game on lies either. Now, Kaplan's ex-fiancée does give him the benefit of the doubt by saying, I can guarantee that these boys are not trying, emphasis hers, to scam anyone, whether they can deliver on it or not. Again, I can't speak to that. I don't know, it's hard to believe someone who would lie about a diamond ring's authenticity to their fiancé, to his fiancée, for 10 months straight, but alright, maybe there was a pure intention with kickstarting this game, with advertising this game, with having the ambition to pursue a project like this, but there has to be an understanding that you have a responsibility to the community you're kickstarting a game to the community that's spending money for your game. There has to come a point where you have to look at the situation, assess it, and say, maybe I bid on way more, chewed on way more than I can swallow. I have to scale things back, or at least open up about the fact that I thought I could do this, I can't, and find ways to make reparations and make amends. But when you keep that going, even knowing full well that you're engaging in a project that's just not feasible, and it's very clearly a scam, then you're complicit. Here's how streamer Kira put it: I don't think either game's developers have the actual intention to not deliver. I just think they're living in a dream world themselves. Yeah, maybe it's delusion that has evolved into a scam, but that delusion is negatively affecting a bunch of people, and it's robbing people of their money. And Kira aptly said that base intent matters very little when the end result is the same and you've lied to everyone throughout, and especially when that lie has gone on for months and months, much like the diamond ring lie, and now with this Kickstarter scam MMO lie that is promising stuff that they absolutely cannot deliver on. But there's certain fans that don't see that. Fans truly believe that someday or some year DreamWorld will become a reality, and this is when this becomes a scam, when you're taking advantage of your loyal followers, people who are giving you everything they can, and you're dragging them along into the pit. That's when things go from making an honest mistake by being overly ambitious to just being a scumbag who's just straight up exploiting and taking advantage of people. Here's one more quote from Kira. They've made claims of solving networking issues that have eluded industry titans to this date, meanwhile having a single developer who has never worked on a video game in his life. Yeah, this inexperienced developer is literally promising things that not even AAA projects with hundreds of millions in budget have been able to accomplish or solve. How do you think this one guy who's just made a couple of Flash games is going to achieve this? Last but not least, DreamWorld is coming in late to the party where we have seen all the magic tricks, and we know this isn't Gandalf we're seeing. Another great resource for those who are curious about this story is this video from Kira TV titled DreamWorld Exposing the Scam Game. You'll actually even see some footage of streams. You'll see some gameplay footage. I mean, look at this. Aside from visual inconsistencies, this barely looks like a game, and yeah, that's the main city whose buildings you can just walk through because there's no collision whatsoever. The video also mentions just how poorly optimized this game is, how poor the performance is, even though the graphics are certainly nothing to write home about. YouTuber Josh Strife Hayes has also dedicated a lot of his content recently on chronicling what's been going on with the DreamWorld disaster. So what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is an indie Kickstarter MMO that took $64,000 from 663 backers. And this guy right here, Kaplan, who promises the world, who promises the moon, is the same guy who lied to his fiancée for 10 months about the authenticity of the diamond on the proposal ring. If he's willing to do that to his fiancée, I can only imagine how little he cares about lying to the community about keeping them dragging along this endeavor that is simply impossible to achieve. Combine that with how they try to bribe content creators for positive coverage. Combine that with how they basically hired kids and tried to give 14-year-olds full-time jobs in an environment that isn't adequate for people of that age. And beyond that, just throwing them under the bus by shifting all the blame to them when the ban hammer had to come down because of even the most gentle of criticisms. Combine that with the nepotism involved with Y Combinator, its core investor, the poor security that not only allows the game to be hacked and for basically anyone to play God and summon assets to the point where you can crash the game, but also a security issue that will allow hackers to actually gain remote access to your PC if they actually go for that. I mean, truly, we have right here one of the worst gaming Kickstarter campaigns of all time from what I can see. And what sucks about DreamWorld is that scams like these erode faith in Kickstarter as a whole, and there are plenty of Kickstarter projects out there that are legit and living up to their promises, keeping the community updated, and making their goals feasible and just doing a good job with the progress of their projects. But the existence of scams like these will make people just all that more suspicious of Kickstarters as a whole and may disincentivize them from investing in projects that may turn out to be worthwhile. Kickstarter always feels like a gamble, and, this Kickstarter campaign, just from the outset, I could tell there was just something very off about the way it looked, the way the promises were marketed and everything. So this is one that I definitely wouldn't have fallen for, but there have been ones that looked really legit and have turned out to be scams, and so it's just hard to know what to invest in. Crap like this really does add to the negative optics surrounding the platform as a whole, and in turn it affects even those with good intentions. And while DreamWorld is hardly the first of its kind, I felt it was worth doing coverage for this game specifically because this guy cannot keep getting away with this. He has to kind of start looking at this situation realistically if he's truly just has pure intentions but is delusional, or he may very well be intentionally scamming people. And if that's the case, well, there's only so long you can keep this up before all of this blows up in your face. It is already blowing up in your face, and it's an especially bad idea to try to scam MMO fans, some of the most analytical people in the world. They'll do their research, and the research for this specific project certainly yielded rather compelling results for all the wrong reasons. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of DreamWorld and of developers, two developers specifically, living in a dream world of their own. Let me know in the comments below what your take is on all of this and on Kickstarter as a whole, and what your experience has been like with backing Kickstarters. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.